So now we're going to create a basic visual layout together, and we're going to be considering some of the basic principles that we just reviewed in the lesson. The first step is to choose and crop 3 to 6 photographs. You guys could choose anything you want. It could be photographs of food that you've created, something from your Instagram account. I chose photographs from a trip that I took in China last summer. I thought these photographs were colorful, they had strong graphic lines, and so I felt that they were a great kind of reservoir of raw material to work from. You can see here I pulled a bunch of them together, and from these I called out 6 of them, and those are the ones that we're going to work with. Now, pick 1 or 2 typefaces to work with. I picked Lava and National. One is a serif and one is a sans serif. Now we're going to build a basic format and a grid. So here we are again at the dialog box in InDesign to begin and create a new document. So here I've got the choice to keep everything standard, but no, I'm not going to do that. I encourage you guys to experiment with non-standard options. So for me, I kept some things standard, 8.5, and I changed the height instead of 11, which is obviously an American standard, 8.5 by 11, to 8.5 by 10. And per our lesson earlier, lots of columns. Why? Because they give us options. So in my case, I chose 12. Why 12? Well, 12 is divisible in all kinds of ways. I can combine 2, 3, 4, 6. It's awesome. And then with the margins, you can see there, it gives you a default of 0.5 all the way around, 0.5 inches, half an inch all the way around. And I simply changed the bottom margin. Very simple, but thought it would give it a little bit of a special look. So here we have our grid. You can see 12 columns per page. That may seem like a lot, but actually you'll find when you begin working with a multi-column grid such as this one, that it really is fun. It sets you free by giving you so many more options. And now we've added the Create Guides. If you remember, it's a pull-down menu from the layout at the top of the InDesign prompt, and it gives us our horizontal rows. Very important. And I just picked randomly 10. Next, I encourage you to begin to create some thumbnails. So how do you make thumbnails? What are thumbnails? So thumbnails are essentially a little mini blueprint to what you're going to be attempting to accomplish in design. So you can see here in my drawings, you don't have to draw well, you really just want to indicate kind of some various techniques for how large photographs will be, where they'll appear in the compositional space, and some thoughts about how you're going to approach your typographic hierarchy. So you can see with a closer look that I've used a pencil, and what that's allowing is it's allowing me to sort of push and pull the lead so that it makes some areas of the type darker and some lighter. So I'm beginning to just play and get a sense of how I'm creating some separation between the elements. If you remember, the basic principle of hierarchy are marks of separation. So finding ways to create distinction between one item and the next. So here it's really just a bunch of scribbles, but you can see if you look at it, you can sense how things are separating, also how I'm beginning to move elements through the page. So with this field, I've got a range of options that I can explore, and next I'm going to begin to build them out into some layouts. So now we're going to define a clear typographic hierarchy. The first step to building your layout is to bring in all of your assets. So we already asked you to select 3 to 6 photographs. We also want you to choose some text to create a headline, a subhead, possibly captions, and if you really want to go hog wild, you can also add things like page numbers, and maybe you invent a title for your magazine. So if you don't have copy for your layouts, use Wikipedia. Anything open source that isn't copyrighted, it's absolutely fine. For a headline and a subhead or a deck, I think you could be creative and come up with your own. Why not? So you can see here I've made the headline very large and bold in this beautiful typeface Lava. I've taken the subhead and I've made it in all capital letters. I thought that it made a nice, clean, simple line. I liked that. And then in the text you can see I took a portion of the text that I thought it's about design of the Forbidden City, which is in particular the subject in Beijing that I'm focusing on, and I made it a little bolder so that it would stand out as a kind of a subtext, another level of complexity. So you can see that in the layout that I created, it's a 2-page spread in a hypothetical magazine. But your layout could be anything. It could be a poster. It could be anything that you want, whatever you're comfortable in. You can also see that I played with scale in the photographs. The photograph on the right I've made much, much larger and left the other two small at this point. You can also notice that the photographs bleed to the edge of the page on the left, the bottom, and the right. Coming off of the photographs, you can see the captions. They are anchored to the grid. However, also on the right, you can see that that caption is anchored to the edge of the image. Inner form, or an edge of an image or form inside of your layout, is often a very good place to anchor text or typography. So I'd just like to point out another thing about alignment. That we're using our grid, we're also wanting to be aware of alignments that we're creating through placement of images and text. So here what I'm talking about is when you look at the alignment, for example, of the little girl and how she's aligned with the text really cleanly, it creates a beautiful, crisp line across that entire page. Similarly, when you look at the headline, all of the letters sit on a baseline, and you can see that the baseline of that title, follow that over and it lines with that big chunky focal image. Beautiful. Creates lovely structure. So looking at it now, I'm thinking I don't want all of the images to bleed. So here you can see I've left the image on the left to bleed to the edge, but the other two I've pulled in. I still have the dramatic scale change and variation happening in the 3 photographs, but now you can see that there's a little bit more energy going on because some of them don't bleed and one of them does. Also notice that in making the photograph on the right much larger, it creates a dynamic asymmetry. So here's our final step. Now we're going to explore some alternate layouts using our already established typographic hierarchy. So I had an idea with this beautiful little girl that appears in the first layouts that I've done as a small jewel-like little image to make her huge and to change the framing and the cropping of that particular image and make her really large. So here I simply imported the typography from the last layout into this layout, and what you can notice is it's too dark. It's hard to read. You could never read it. So what I've done is change it to white. All of the typography that existed in black before is simply reversed out to white. But there's something missing, I feel. I feel that the right side needs something, so I'm going to add a photograph. It's still asymmetrical, but I feel it's a little more balanced with this photograph on the right. So here's a whole nother layout with a completely different photograph. And my thinking with this was, for the subject, Forbidden City, that this giant iron gate would be a perfect focal point for this new spread that I'm designing. See, the typography is still pretty much the same. Same sizes and weights and distribution. I've just brought them in with a new photograph, full bleed. What I'm noticing now that I look at it, though, is that the right side of this image has got an awkward little kind of gap on the right. I don't like that. Boom. Taken care of. Can you see how just taking out that little gap is just, it makes it easier to look at. Our eye just doesn't get stuck on it, which is important. I call that a visual irritant. So to support this new photograph I've brought in with this iron gate that's got all of these circular elements inside of it, I decided to change the headline type to be more reflective of that sort of architecture. So you can see I'm now using national in a really chunky, bold weight, and you can see the dots of the I, the J, and the I are just a beautiful little sequence of giant, heavy dots. Also, to add some richness to this layout, I've decided to choose photographs that I thought worked with this big gate image in interesting and different ways. The concrete chunks at the bottom I felt also had the circles that we are trying to pick up on, but then the other image is much more kind of organic and natural, and I thought that provided a beautiful counterpoint to the rigidity of the gate. Still, there's something that bothers me about this layout. And this is it. What I wanted to do is have the gate begin on the left because it just makes sense that, well, the gate keeps you out of the Forbidden City and it yields to all of the information on the inside. So by moving it to the left, very simply moving it, it's a really nice kind of introduction to the chapter, I thought. Here, and finally, I've flipped the secondary images so that the cool concrete is next to the hot, heavy iron gate, and I think they work better together. And also by pulling it off of the bleed in the margin, it gives it a little bit more space and is a nicer, it's just nicer compositionally. So here you can see the final versions of the 3 layouts that I explored. You can see in each of them the typography is fairly similar, but each of them has a very different feel based on how I worked with the images and the principles of framing, scale, symmetry, cropping, and hierarchy. So you may be wondering, how do you do this if you don't know InDesign? Well, of course you can use any program. As long as you're harnessing the same principles and you're really thinking about the lessons we just gave you, you could use anything. You could use Illustrator, you could use PowerPoint, whatever program you're comfortable in. As you're browsing the gallery of other people's work, I encourage you to be specific in your comments about the principles that we've just gone through, so that instead of just saying that you like it or you don't like it, think about why. Think about the principles and what you might say that might be helpful to the person that's uploaded their work. I'm so excited to see your layouts and your process in the class.